in talking to people about even this podcast that we were doing, it's interesting because people immediately start telling me their stories about their mother, and mother would use guilt.
You think that?
as a weapon, and I'm learning that so do other mothers. Welcome to A Daughter's Inheritance. I'm Susan Seal, and this is a podcast about mothers and daughters, the whole, honest, complicated truth of it. I'll be sitting down with women and giving them space to talk about their mothers and the inheritance they received. But before I sit down with other daughters, I wanted to start with my own relationship with my mom. And I've asked my first cousin, Linda Weir, to have this conversation with me. Linda, thank you for being here.
I'm looking forward to it.
Linda and I grew up more like sisters than cousins, and she knew my mom in ways that were both the same as mine and in some completely different ways. We grew up in rural Mississippi on either side of our grandparents, my mother's parents and her father's parents. We had about 90 acres of land, some pasture land, some forest land, and as we say in the South, there were some pea patches and watermelon patches that we grew up running around in. And we both are a little bit sentimental and have an affinity for and a connection to that place. Wouldn't you say?
No, I would definitely agree.
Matter of fact, I remember your daughter saying one time that she said she told people she was from Philadelphia. And we reminded her that she never actually lived in Philadelphia. And she said, but that's where my soul is from. And I think we're a little bit like that. That's where our soul is from.
No, I would say that we are too.
And Mother was certainly that way. So this is the first episode. And I am really excited about it. And I will say it feels really special that we're starting with my mom. But, where else would we start if not starting with Bobbie Seal? But I'm also really looking forward to these conversations with other women and their moms. I think there's just going to be so many different, unique relationships and experiences and connections that we'll be able to explore. So I'm really looking forward to that too.
So I'm curious, what sparked this idea for the podcast?
I am a little bit like my mother in that ideas will just pop in my head, and I'm like, okay, and then let's do it.
You're
Let's go.
100% full speed.
Let's go. Let's get it done. And I think part of it is I wanted to tell her story. And not that it's this dramatic, you're probably not going to make a movie about Bobbie Seal, but I wanted to preserve her legacy and share her story. And I'm doing a podcast at work, and I got to thinking, what if we did a podcast that we could tell her story, and then to provide space for other women, the inheritances they've received, to preserve their legacy and share their stories. Their stories are going to be very different. I mean, there will be some that are like this, the kind of the basic, my mother was a good mother, but I was her daughter and we butted heads and things, and there's challenges. But I think there's going to be a lot of unique stories that other women want to capture that. And then in that, I think also women will find some comfort in knowing that, it's not just me.
Mm-hmm.
Other people have a similar story, even if it's a bad one. Not all mothers were good. Women can find connection in this, and maybe even some healing if that's what what they need, and maybe some laughter too. It's fun to remember. There's funny things to think about and talk about. So probably those three things. First was to preserve the legacy of my own mother, and to provide space for other women to tell their stories, and then also so that people can find connection and comfort and healing through those stories.
No, that sounds great. What I love about that is it doesn't matter what journey you're on, at some point, I think one of those three elements will tie in. So this is going to be a great idea.
Listeners, you'll learn more about me as we go along, but we'll do a little introduction just so you can frame that a little bit. where we grew up in Philadelphia, Mississippi. And I went to college in Jackson at Millsaps College, and then went to Atlanta for about 10 years, which was great. It was a great time to be there. My late 20s, early 30s, lots to do. And then after about 10 years, I was tired of doing all that and tired of the traffic. So if I don't know if you were there on Mother's retirement when she had her retirement tea, and I actually interviewed the day of her retirement from the Mississippi State Extension Service. And I hadn't told her that I was interviewing. She wasn't overly happy that I moved to Atlanta. And so it was kind of a surprise. I'm interviewing to come back home. And so I have worked for Mississippi State since about 1999, except for the 3 years that I did international ministry, which also my mother was not very happy about.
No, she was not.
I spent some time in Ghana, Nigeria, India, Nepal. And since then, I've probably been to 15 or so different countries, both just personal and work. And I'm still at Mississippi State. Currently, I am the Dean of the College of Professional and Continuing Studies. I don't have children of my own, but my brother Sid and I have always been very close. And he has two amazing daughters, and they have families of their own now. You have two wonderful daughters as well that I've always been close to. So I'll pitch it to you, and you can tell us a little bit about who is Linda Weir.
Well, I grew up as an Neshoba County girl as well. I went to East Central. Then after that, I moved to Meridian, and that's kind of where I started my family. I have two daughters. Have worked at Northeast Elementary now. This is going on my 23rd year. Children are definitely a passion of mine. But so as soon as we get started, how would you describe Bobbie? Maybe one word that would kind of sum up who she is.
One word to sum up Bobbie Seal. So I think that the one word would be independent. In her older years, that was kind of a pain because it's like a strong-willed 4-year-old. She in her later years she had dementia, and so she was very independent, and she wanted to do what she wanted to do. And I'm struggling with, okay, is this the best thing for her health? Is this safe for her? But so that was hard from the independent standpoint, and we've both heard her say, "I'm still what the mother." So
Or the boss.
the boss. That's right. So independent in that sense, and those are the freshest memories that are on my mind. But as you think back, she was a young woman in the 1950s in Mississippi. She had an associate's degree. She went to college, was living in Jackson, our capital city, for those that don't know a lot about Mississippi. She had a roommate. They were living in an apartment in Jackson, going dancing at Club Catherine, and just having a great time. But for someone who grew up in the country and very different than our grandmother, who didn't learn to drive, was very dependent on our grandfather. So that was really independent of mother at that time, particularly. And then she had a family. So after she got married, some of that changed because my dad was more of that, I want you to stay home with the kids. And she did, but then she got her own job and her own career, later. And she was always independent. And like I said, sometimes that was positive and sometimes that was a struggle. But what about you? What would you describe her?
Well, I thought about it, and I'm like, what keeps coming to mind? And of course, it's going to be two words.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't just stick to one. But
You're an overachiever.
yeah, that's it. So to me, she's the true, kind of go back to that iconic movie. She's a true Steel Magnolia
Mm-hmm.
because she is independent. Um, she was always brutally honest. Even I can remember even in my younger years.
Brutally. As her daughter, I will say brutally.
But I can remember even in my younger years, sometimes to the point of, not that I was ever scared of her, but like it was a
Mhm.
fearful respect. Um, but she was also very much about community
Mhm.
and about family and about tradition. And I think, that pretty much sums up what we all think of when we think of Steel Magnolia.
Yeah. Well, and you say that, tradition. I think you and I both get a lot of that. I mean, like I said, we're sentimental. We like those traditions. We like to keep those traditions. And she was kind of the keeper of that. Our grandfather, he was kind of the patriarch of the family, and then after he was gone, it was my mom. I mean, she was the matriarch, and I mean, some of it, we did what she wanted us to do from the tradition standpoint because we were scared not to, but she kept those traditions alive, and I think we've passed some of those down. Although traditions change over time, but I think you and I both are very bad about we won't throw anything away.
Hmm. Speaking of her mom, have you thought any of things that she got from her mom that you can see in how she parented you, or things that she was very different from her mom?
um, i- i- for the most part, she was more like and we called them Mama and Papa. We're from the country. She was more like Papa's side of the family, but she did get some of that. Our grandmother was a stern woman. Is that
That
would that?
would that would describe her well.
But I mean, she was a homemaker. She did the quilts, and she was very community minded. I mean, our grandmother was very community minded. It's just her community was small. I don't know that she ever traveled out of the state. I mean, she came from Kemper County, which is 20 minutes away, and that was really her world. Kemper County, Neshoba County. So our grandmother didn't travel very much, and she was more dependent. She was very dependent on our grandfather, but she was community minded. But really, I've heard so many stories about Sadie. And I always said if I had a daughter, I was gonna name her Sadie. Well, I didn't, so I just named my dog Sadie. But Sadie was our papa's mother, and she was that extroverted, very outgoing. And I don't, I mean, I've never met her, but I feel like I know her because mother told so many stories about her. And, some of those, and I know you've heard these too, the cousins or grandkids or whatever, as when they were adults, they would go by and go, hey, would you like to go to town? And didn't matter what she was doing, you know what she would do? She'd brush off the front of her dress and say, "Well, let me get my purse."
Hmm.
And I say those things now. I mean, if somebody says you want to go, and we're like, "Well, what my mother and Sadie would say. Well, let's let me get my purse." She was always ready to go, and so I was reading or listening to something the other day where they talked about women do inherit so much from their mother, but they really do inherit a lot from the women who came before them. Their
Hmm.
grandmother or other great grandmothers, or even people that we don't know about. But so many things are passed down. But I think she did get some things from her mother, but personality wise, she was very different. I mean, don't you think?
No, I think so too. I think she was a lot like Papa, and I think she saw some of the things in Mama where she was dependent, and I think she knew she wanted more, and I think she knew she wanted more for her children,
Hmm.
because I
Yeah.
I think she really pushed y'all um to be independent. She wanted y'all to go out and do, like, she loved hearing stories of your travels. She just didn't want you to do it.
That's right.
Do it all the time or it be like a job.
That's right.
I think that's what bothered her the most when, you know, you took the 3 years to do missions. It was so different for her. She couldn't understand that. So she had two sides of the coin. One side, she was so proud of you for doing something completely different and something I think she wished she could have experienced, but I think it scared her.
Yeah, I think she would have. she would have done that. I
Mhm.
think in that way we're a lot alike. Now, in some ways, I think you're right. I think she was a little bit jealous.
Mhm.
That, well, I wish I hadn't gotten married maybe when I did, or had more freedom, because I could have seen her for doing that. And our grandmother, or great grandmother, Sadie, she certainly would have. And our
Mhm.
grandfather.
Yeah, he
I
would
mean,
have
he
too.
loved to. Our grandfather was very outgoing, knew everybody in town. I remember one time he went to a college football game, and here you are with thousands of people. He said, I'm just really bothered by this, because I don't know any of these people. It's like, but I mean, he wasn't at home, but at home he always knew people, and I'm that way. It really does bug me if I go somewhere and I don't see people I know. So sometimes we've said you have gotten more from our grandmother's side, because growing up you were shy,
Yeah.
because even though we grew up on either side of our grandparents and was running around and doing all the things, we didn't kind of get in each other's business. Our families were separate, and I think some of that was because of my dad and your mom, and
Yeah, I don't think I realized it as we were kids
yeah,
because
yeah,
we would play together a lot. But being that close, our families did not, like you said, get in each other's business or really intertwine about like relational stuff. We would get together on holidays and stuff. So we didn't do that.
so I in my mind, mother really became a stronger influence as you got a little bit older. And I know there were probably things that she helped you through, because she was like a mother to you, and your dad was, I've always said he was like another father to me. But when did those influences really start happening? I guess when did she become a major influence in your life?
I think she did right after I graduated high school, my parents separated. And then, very soon after got divorced. In the midst of that, we started getting closer and started having some conversation. But I think it really took off when I found out I was becoming a mom.
Hmm.
And I did not have a great relationship with my mom, and I needed somebody.
Hmm.
And she stepped in and filled that gap. Through that, and me, I ended up raising girls as a single parent. So I think she really started stepping in and feeling that. And the relationship really changed from aunt into more of almost a mother daughter. I even look back now sometimes, I think if our families had become, I mean, we were close, but not like closer like that, what kind of influence Bobbie could have had on me, you know, in my middle school years, in my high school years, to challenge me and to encourage me. Would I have done some things differently? We could have had some conversations.
Yeah. Well, and I was reading something the other day that said so much of a child's independence or dependence, how independent they are,
Mm-hmm.
is really not set, but such a huge influence by the time they're 5 years old,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of blew me away. And so I think for us, my brother and I, um, she was that influence. I mean, who is normally, that's the mother's the influence there, until you're, at that
Mm-hmm.
early stages in your life. She was a she was a good mother. Her friends when we were growing up were the parents of my friends. She was a room mother. Do they still have room mothers like they did?
No, not really.
It used to be. So they would bake brownies or do stuff and come at recess and just really be there for different events and activities. She was a band parent, which was, they would work concession stands. She was there for basketball games. So she was a very involved, engaged parent, and mother. And so that was really instrumental for me in growing up.
Let me ask you this.
Uh huh.
At what point or was there a certain instance where you realized that she was more human, you know, outside of mom? Like, was there a point that stands out that, you know, where you saw a different side of her other than being the homeroom mom, other than
Yeah.
being.
I think probably um teen years when I saw her struggle. You know, because you think parents just know how to do everything, and I mean, parents have all the answers, and then there's a point as you get a little bit older, and maybe it was, before teen years, but I remember I remember us hiding from the Avon lady because she was she would be knocking on the door, and had the product or whatever that mother had ordered, but we didn't have any money to, she didn't
Mm-hmm.
have the money to pay for it, and so we would, okay, just get back here, let's be quiet. Surely there's other people that have hidden from the Avon lady or whoever it is today, and so that really struck me as, okay, that's kind of different. And my dad was a blue collar, he was a pipe fitter, which was fine. And I didn't think we were poor or anything. I think we were maybe lower middle class,
Mm-hmm.
but except when he was laid off. And then that was hard. And he didn't want her to work. So she really would struggle with some of that, of the family finances. And so I started to kind of see that. And then when she was probably middle age and I was later teens, you know how stories just or things just stick in your mind, events that maybe aren't that
Mm-hmm.
big a deal, but they are in your mind. I remember she used to make caramel cakes. Do you remember her making the caramel
I
cakes?
do.
They were like she made a sour cream pound cake in a long loaf pan, and then she would make the caramel icing in an iron skillet. Well, if anybody's ever made caramel icing, it's hard to do. I mean,
It is.
it's very
Temperature
temper.
has to be right. Like, a lot of factors go into that.
Apparently, this was not going well, and she started just freaking out a little bit. That wasn't appropriate for just caramel not going well. That stuck in my mind still to this day. I can picture her standing there in the kitchen and just, it was a traumatic thing. And so then, she had some depression that I learned about and kind of started seeing. And man, I look back now, it was probably perimenopause,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
But then it didn't make sense. It's like, oh my God, this is a huge, huge thing. And so that's why I think as we get older ourselves and we look back and as we pass through the phases that our mothers were in, some of it makes more sense because we're like, oh yeah, she was about this age when that happened.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's interesting too, because again, where we talked about our families not communicating, I think both of our families were a lot of times going through the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we got a lot of this from Mama, because
Mm-hmm.
Papa was pretty transparent. But if we could have talked some, and I know when my dad was going through my divorce, his divorce with my mom, your Bobby would often say that he would come up after work when it was dusk,
Mm-hmm.
and they would sit in a swing and they would sit side by side, so they didn't have to look. He didn't have to look at her, and that they had some of their best conversations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
So
because they were close.
yeah,
I mean,
they
they were.
they were they were close, even when we were growing up, but it just really became more transparent, and then they grew in their relationship.
And that was one thing that was really hard. How old was your dad when he died?
64.
I had just pictured because they live out in the country, and I was back here in Starkville at Mississippi State at that time, and I'm thinking they have each other. Because my dad had already passed away, and your dad was divorced, and our grandparents were gone, but they were still there
Mm-hmm.
and had each other. They had friendships and all the things, and then your dad suddenly died from elective surgery, and then I was like, oh, I mean, there was the grieving of him dying, passing away, and then also the grieving of mother losing her best friend,
Mm-hmm.
and then what that meant for her as well going forward. So it's kind of like this double whammy. We lost him, and we lost some parts of her.
Yeah, I think we did lose some parts of her, and I think some of her even stepped up to a higher um, anarchy, that she knew that the family now rested on her shoulders,
Mhm.
keeping all of us close and all of us together.
And in talking to people about even this podcast that we were doing, it's interesting because people immediately start telling me their stories about about their mothers, and mother would use guilt
You
as
think? You,
as
you think that?
as a weapon, and I'm learning that so do other mothers. But yeah, she would wield that guilt sword. And some of that, well, I'm the only one up here. I'm by myself. Now we had cousins, and we still do.
Hmm.
They're still
Yeah,
there. That
I'm
really,
just sitting here all by myself.
yeah, just sitting there all by myself. And so she was definitely used that tool and much more after he was. I mean, she used it a little bit, even like with me going to do an international ministry and other going to Atlanta.
Yeah. And then I think she fell back on too when you went to the missions, because you had a job with the state,
Security.
and
She liked security.
security,
Yeah.
and I think she felt, it became real raw and present to her on like when y'all were going through some harder times, when your dad got laid off and all that. And I think she was fearful of that for you.
Yeah. Why would you give up a safe job with good retirement? When I told her we were in a restaurant, because I thought that might be safer. So I was telling her what I was going to do. Well, she got up and ran to the bathroom, just not happy at all about it. And we talked about it a little bit later. And I was explaining to her more. She didn't give me a whole lot of a chance to explain it. So I was trying to explain to her a little bit more. And she was like, well, I didn't know. I just thought you were going to be like Mother Teresa or something. And I'm like, well, no. However, I mean, she was a saint. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world
Right.
to aspire to
But see,
that.
I would see two sides of it. Like I would
Yeah.
see her doing, the guilt to you, or,
Hmm.
just throwing all these questions. But then when you weren't there, I would see her really, telling other people stories that you had shared with her, and just the proudness of her mother, for her daughter. So I got to see, kind of both sides of what she felt.
Well, and you were a buffer for me sometimes, because y'all were close in a lot of ways. You were like her daughter, but you weren't her daughter. So some of the things that mother daughter butting heads, or because I'm like
Hmm.
her, so but you could buffer that for I think maybe both of us even.
Yeah.
Are there ways that you see that I'm like her?
Yeah, I think there are a couple.
What would those be?
um,
Be nice. I'm sitting right here.
I think you're a lot like her in she re- family's very important to you, and you are, even though you don't have any kids, you're very close to Sid's daughters, and you're extremely close to mine. I mean, I think like you've said, we're not just cousins.
Hmm.
We're really, like more like immediate family. So I think that you're the same in. I think she was very much in doing good things for her community. I think of her in the library board.
Hmm.
All the positive changes she brought there. You're in the Rotary Club, and all the positive things that you're helping with a core group to bring to Starkville. So I think a lot of those kind of things, you carry a lot of those values that she had.
She, I'm a little bit independent
A little, just a smidge, and you just like to do your things your way.
But one thing I try to do that's different, I remember her saying, I am not going to age gracefully. And she was a woman of her word.
Yeah, that she
so,
was.
so I'm trying to think, as I get older, I'm going to try to age gracefully. And because I think there are good things, and there's things that I'm proud of that I'm like her. Sometimes we say, you open your mouth and your mother comes out. And there's things that I'm like, you know, mother would have handled it this way, and I'm good with that. And then there's other things that I'm like, okay, you have to do better than this, or do this in a different way. But she was funny too.
She was.
Now, sometimes she was unintentionally funny. Tell the story about Willie
Willie
Coleman.
Coleman.
Willie Coleman.
So we had it was me and you and your brother's wife Cindy. A family friend Mel had we were going to go camping right up.
Kendall was with us. Your daughter,
Kendall
yeah.
was with us too, and we were going to go camping just in the pasture. And so we had, set up a campsite. And when we woke up the next morning, there was a little stray dog. Because we were very much out in the country.
We were in the woods.
When we were definitely in the woods. And then all of a sudden, this little dog appears. We call him now, like, he's an angel dog.
Turns out he really was.
He was, but we named him Willie Coleman because we were camping, and a lot of camping stuff is Coleman, and then the Willie after my dad. He became Bobbie's new child.
He really was. Because I don't remember. I mean, we were a loving family. She told us she loved us, but I mean, not like all the time.
Yeah.
She told that little dog, I love you, like constantly.
Yes.
My brother and I think got a little jealous at times.
Yeah, and he's constantly in her lap. I can remember going to, traveling up here for, to visit you or whatever. And guess who came along? Willie Coleman. She wasn't going to leave him at home by
No,
himself.
And I did not know, and here's a tip for our listeners. You can get a 99-cent hamburger patty at Sonic. Just the patty. Because that's what Willie Coleman liked. Was a hamburger patty. And she would go to Popeyes. Because she loved Popeyes.
Mm-hmm. She would get him a leg and a thigh.
Because he liked dark meat, turned out, and she'd get her a chicken breast. But she would, when she'd take him out, she never called it a leash. She always called it a lease, and so that we'd all laugh about that. That go get Willie's lease, and we're gonna take him out. And another word that she mispronounced all the time was asparagus. We didn't have asparagus growing up. I mean, we had butter beans and peas and okra and that kind of stuff. But when we'd have asparagus, she would always call it asparagus to the point that my brother Sid and I, we would forget which way was the right way. So.
Well, and another thing is she added a different ending to my name.
Linder.
I was Linder. I was never Linda. I was Linder. So we used to joke because my brother's name Mark, so we would intentionally call him Marker. But yeah.
Yeah, she was funny.
Okay, so I'm going to push you out on this one just a little bit.
Okay.
You ready?
Uh-huh.
Us non-emotional. Like, is there anything you wish she would have given you that she didn't?
Like a physical thing, a tangible thing?
It could be anything.
Well, okay. So I'm trying to stall. This is my stall. So what exactly? Redefine the question.
Do you want to phone a friend?
I think, yeah. I think, I don't know if giving me something, maybe less of a hard time at times.
Yeah.
As I was a woman, I think she would be hard on me. And it's interesting because as I've kind of thought about a lot of this stuff and remembering back, I remember friends that would be mad at her for how she treated me. I can't remember why. I can't remember what it was that she did. Now, she would be blunt about things. Well, you need to lose weight. You're, whatever. Those kind of things. And she would at times, particularly as she got older, I think she would try to manipulate my behavior a little bit of the guilt and those kind of things. And so I wish maybe less of that, but she gave me a lot. I mean, she was a great mother. She shared with me. We shared experiences together. She shared the stories of our grandparents and great-grandparents. We talked about those. She shared her time. There was, times when I had a problem that, especially early career when I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to pay for my car insurance. Well, that was the time Daddy was laid off. She didn't have it either. But she still helped me, and we still figured it out. And so I think she gave me most of what, I needed. I don't think I'm lacking for anything. There were times, and I think there have also been friends that said, you are scared of your mother, aren't you?
I think to a degree we all were a
That's
little
right.
bit. I can remember probably one of the first times that the girls probably had a kind of a fear of her
Mhm.
is when we were going to rearrange some things in her living room and den.
Mhm.
And
Oh, yeah, and
yeah,
that was when she was older, yeah.
yeah, but she didn't want that happening. But I
Uh-uh.
think that's the first time that the girls had ever really seen a big interaction,
Mhm.
with her being very adamant on, well, I'm just going to move it all back when y'all leave. And
Mhm.
I'm not moving and I'm going to sit here. And
Yeah, and she would get fairly strong about those
oh, she
things.
would. She would.
But she had a strong personality. But people loved her. I mean, she was great. You talk about your love for kids and you're really good with them. She was too. And maybe I think some of yours you got that because you were babysitting when you were
Mm-hmm.
young. So I think you've always been around kids. But she worked in with 4-H young people. She took us on trips and she had our monthly meetings and coordinated and led all that. And she was really good with those kids. And I think people respected her in the community. I
Mm-hmm.
think they enjoyed her. Some of the people that she worked with, it'd be funny to get some of their stories because you know Joe Beth,
Mm-hmm.
and she's got some funny stories that she just starts cackling and telling about. Um, and some of it's just like, well, she was not going to put up with this, or whatever it was.
Well, and one thing that stands out about Bobbie to me too is I joke for myself that I have a sandbox group of friends,
Mhm.
and it's pretty much just this little. But Bobbie, she had such a variety, you know, because I think about her quilt guild group, her library group, her extension group.
Mhm.
She was very much, she had a huge friend group, and it wasn't just a casual friendship with a lot of them. It was, she had a strong friendship with a lot of women. I can remember them going off, was it to Tennessee, or
Mhm.
Kentucky to look at quilts, and
She loved people.
she
She
did.
loved being around
She
people.
did.
And this is one thing that I don't know if it's an inheritance per se, but she loved to go out to eat
Yes, she did.
forever. I mean, she always loved to go out to eat. And part of that was it's not about the food, it's about who she was going to see. Because there was one time we went out to Ronnie's Steakhouse, or Runny's, as she called it. And he had a back room. We'd go in that back, he'd set us in that back room, but there was nobody else back there.
Mm-hmm.
And she was just so uncomfortable that at one point I'm like, can we please move up to the front? Because she's not going to see anybody
Mm-hmm.
back here.
Yeah.
The food's the same, either place, but she wasn't going to see anybody. And so she loved going out to eat, and I'm that way too.
Well, and I can remember when, I would go out for the weekend. We would go to Williamsville. We would go to the co-op. Like
Hmm.
we would go to Jerome Tanks. Like we had a list of, and it wasn't because we were going to get anything, but we were going because we would see different people in each setting.
She was always creative. You're creative. I'm creative in different ways. I'm not artistic. Yeah, I mean you have some artistic abilities and skills, and she was artistic. I mean, she did all the things. Liquid embroidery. I don't know if anybody remembers liquid embroidery, but quilting. She was really good at quilting, and not just the sewing part, not just the stitches, but the colors. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, she could really pick out colors that just blended so well, and I think that's a talent, and that's a skill. We did macrame and decoupage and whatever the craft of the day that we were doing it.
Well, I don't know if you knew she even came when Kendall was in her elementary quest class. She came and did the what was the little hobby? It was a little girl and a little boy. It was like hobby suit.
Oh, the hop. Yeah, I
You
know
know
what
what
you're
I'm
talking about.
talking about?
Uh huh.
But like she came and did a lesson with them on that.
What is that called?
I don't remember. I can
There's
say I
somebody
can.
listening right now, and they're like yelling it at us. So they know what it is. I remember when my dad died. Within 10 minutes, the house was full of people. Peyton and Eli Manning's grandmother was one of them,
Mm-hmm.
and she would say, "You go over here and you do this, and we've got this under control." And she was also a Southern belle, so you had all these strong Southern women running things, and you just, okay, yes, ma'am, this is exactly what I will do. But they were good. They were good friends, real friends, and I think we learned that from her as well of
Yeah.
how to be a good friend. to people. Any other memories that really stand out to you?
I think one that I don't know that I knew in the moment to really appreciate it, but looking back now, like I'm so grateful for is, in 2020 when we got out for spring break, we weren't supposed to go anywhere, lockdown. Well, Bobbie Seal did not understand lockdown. And
But a lot of people, older
no,
people, didn't.
they didn't. But, you and Sid were both still, having to work.
Of course, your
So
daughter locked down with me, so
she did. So we just traded. You got my daughter and I got your
that's
mom.
right.
But I spent a little over a month with her. I think we went to Popeyes almost every day.
Mhm.
We had a lot of fried chicken and apple pies, but we also just did, riding in the country and her showing me things, places that she grew up in, things she did. We would visit cemeteries. We would look back through old pictures in the evenings and, just some things that she had kept of her parents. I'm grateful for that time now because you and I both neither one are slow down people,
Mm-mm.
but that time period made us sit and slow down, and I'm grateful that I did that
Mhm.
because a lot of times when we would visit, it would be rush rush or let's go do this and let's go do that. Well, we couldn't go do anything. We sat in the yard and swang and talked. There are a lot of other like smaller memories like that really stands out
And
to
I
me.
I remember that being special because I remember y'all sending me pictures from like the old home place in Kemper County,
Mm-hmm.
or and it wasn't anything there but like daffodils, but it was important to her.
Mm-hmm. It was because she would show me the layout of okay, well, this is where the bedroom used to be, or this
Mhm.
is the well where we went and got the water, and
Mhm.
this is the storm shelter. And so just to be able to watch her relive those stories,
Mhm.
and see how important it was to her,
Mhm.
and to know I've got that now to,
Mhm.
to share with family and to pass on.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, and that's an inheritance.
Mm-hmm.
Those stories, those memories. And, some of the stories we tell the same stories over and over again. I think families do. She would tell the one of her going to school, that she had a perfect attendance record, which is kind of amazing. And she walked to school both ways, not necessarily uphill, but and I think I measured it, and school was 3 or 4 miles away,
Mm-hmm.
and many days that she had to walk
Yeah.
to school. Now, the funny thing was, I remember in her like 70s, and the doctor would ask her, now, Miss Bobbie, do you exercise? And she would
Mm-hmm.
say, well, I walk to school both ways. I'm like, okay, well, that was like 50 something years ago or 60 years ago, but okay. So she's very proud of that. So, what do you think she passed down to you?
I think she helped me develop a confidence in who I am. We talked about like I was
Mm-hmm.
shy and wouldn't say a lot, but I think she helped me develop a confidence in who I am, not only as a mom,
Mm-hmm.
but just as a person to be able to use some of those gifts and talents, in my community. Because there's a lot of things that I do now. I do family and community engagement, and so there's a lot of things that I feel like I think about things that she organized with 4-H and different things, and I think watching her organize and do. I think you don't think you're picking up on it at the time, but I think she taught me a lot of that. But most importantly, I think she taught me, what the importance of our family is. Because we argue, and we all
Mm-hmm.
have differences of opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But to be cousins, like we're pretty close. One thing I learned from her, and I learned from our grandfather as well, is the appreciation of older people. And the value, and not being so many younger people are fearful of older people. But I think because of how we grew up and watching Papa and watching Bobby, because they were always interacting
Mm-hmm.
with older people, and the wisdom that comes from that.
Yeah. And I think that's something you're passing down, not just to your own daughters. And I think that's part of it too. You pass down things to other young people and influence them as well. Well, thank you for doing this.
I'm honored to be asked, and I'm looking forward to it because everybody that you interview, whether it's your journey with Bobbie or other people's journey, they're all like their own
Yeah.
individual fabrics. You're putting together a patchwork
Oh,
of a lot of different stories,
yeah, it really is.
and and you're creating a quilt that will comfort some people. It will provide different things for them, but ultimately, it does remind me of Bobbie.
You said it was like therapy in the preparation of it.
It was.
It's been like therapy for me too, in that, those last 4 or 5 years were hard. She had dementia. She was independent with dementia. So it was really difficult trying to make the right decisions, and even then, her saying, I'm still the mother, and trying to balance what is good for her health and what is good for her, just like you would a child,
Mm-hmm.
when that's not what she wanted. And she wanted to stay in her house at Philadelphia, and I'm doing everything I can. And just, she had never been in the hospital much. I don't think she had had any surgeries until she was in her 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And so those last years were just hard. They were gut wrenching in some ways. And those tend to dominate your memories. But this has given me the opportunity to resurrect some of the other memories, some of the memories of her stories as a girl.
Mm-hmm.
I remember her telling stories about things that Papa would do for her because he just wanted to make her happy, and her stories of growing up, and her stories as a young woman going dancing at Club Catherine, or whatever, but then as a young mother, and all throughout her life. And I think sometimes when those last years are hard, they kind of dominate. But she had 85 other years. But it was good to think back on better times when she was happy and she was healthy. Hearing her voice giving us advice is really helpful.
Live life to the fullest in a spiritual way and have faith in God that God would guide them is what they do. But to really have fun, life doesn't need to be, because you get over anything, life doesn't need to be sad or unhappy. And to love one another, I think it's great. Stay close to your family and love them.
I love hearing her say, have faith, have fun, and love one another. She was in a happy place there, and it's good to remember those times.
Wow, that's such a reminder because those last few years were hard. But those things she said, that was the epitome of who she was and how she lived. And just what a reminder of the values that she had for her life and just being able to hear her voice again.
Because as we've said, those last few years were difficult, and we had a lot of hard decisions to make.
You and Sid worked together on a lot of those decisions, but she saw Sid differently
Mm-hmm.
than she saw you.
Yeah.
And that's got to be hard,
Mm-hmm.
because you're both in agreement on this is the best decision.
Mm-hmm.
But while she wouldn't give Sid grief, she would you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the sons often are treated a little bit differently, and he's a good son and a good brother.
Yeah.
But there's just some differences there, in expectations of a daughter. So I want to close with something that she left that is special, and I think because those last few years, you're thinking, was she happy? Is she okay? How do I make her? All the things that you're trying to do, and you're kind of becoming the parent, and she's becoming the child, and so you want to make sure of all those things. Well, when we were going through some of her files and stuff, and I found she left a poem for Sid and I about when she would be gone, and then she left a letter that to both of us. And I'm not gonna read all of it, but I want to pull out a couple of things that I think was really this part of the inheritance that's helpful. She said, to Sid and Susan, I leave this old house and a few acres of land. There isn't much money, but just split what little there is between you. Then she goes on, she talks a little bit, and then she says, to my precious daughter, Susan, I leave my Bibles with the 1,000,000 gospel lines. Sing them to your loved ones. Tell them of Jesus' love so strong. Take what strength I gave to you and be patient, kind, and fair. And this above everything to me was really helpful when she said, let no one shed a tear because I was the most blessed woman on earth. That's the inheritance that was so helpful at that time. And even now, that in her right mind, whenever she sat down to write this, she said, I'm blessed. And thank you for listening to A Daughter's Inheritance. I hope you found something in this conversation, comfort, connection, recognition, maybe even a laugh or two. If this resonated with you, please follow the show so you don't miss the next daughter's stories. And if you want to share your inheritance with me, I'd love to hear from you. So, in the words of my mother, be patient, kind, and fair.